Michael Schumacher, German pronunciation, Mcalu Max Lissen, born the 3rd of January, 1969, is a retired German racing driver. Schumacher is a 7-time Formula One, F1, world champion, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. He holds many of Formula One's driver records, including most championships, race victories, fastest laps, pole positions, and most races won in a single season, 13 in 2004. In 2002, he became the only driver in Formula One history to finish in the top 3 in every race of a season, and also broke the record for most consecutive podium finishes. According to the official Formula One website, he is statistically the greatest driver the sport has ever seen. After beginning with karting, Schumacher won German Drivers' Championships in Formula König and Formula Three, before joining Mercedes in the World Sportscar Championship. After one Mercedes-funded race for the Benetton Formula One team, Schumacher signed as a driver for the Benetton Formula One team in 1991. After winning consecutive championships with Benetton in 1994/5, Schumacher moved to Ferrari in 1996. And won another 5 consecutive drivers' titles with them from 2000 to 2004. Schumacher retired from Formula One driving in 2006, staying with Ferrari as an advisor. Schumacher agreed to return for Ferrari partway through 2009 as cover for the badly injured Felipe Massa, but was prevented by a neck injury. Schumacher returned to Formula One on a permanent basis from 2010 with the Mercedes team, before retiring for a second time at the conclusion of the 2012 season. His career was not without controversy, including being twice involved in collisions in the final race of a season that determined the outcome of the World Championship, with Damon Hill in 1994 in Adelaide, and with Jacques Villeneuve in 1997 in Jerez. Off the track, Schumacher is an ambassador for UNESCO and a spokesman for driver safety. He has been involved in numerous humanitarian efforts throughout his life and donated tens of millions of dollars to charity. Schumacher and his younger brother, Ralph, are the only brothers to win races in Formula One, and they were the first brothers to finish first and second in the same race, a feat they repeated in 4 subsequent races. Schumacher suffered a serious head injury whilst skiing in the French Alps in December 2013. He was airlifted to a hospital and placed in a medically induced coma, having suffered a traumatic brain injury. As of January 2014, Schumacher remains in a coma and remains in a critical condition, having undergone 2 surgeries to relieve pressure on his brain. Early years. Schumacher's title-winning German Formula 3 car, from 1990. Schumacher was born in Hürth, North Rhine-Westphalia, to Rolf Schumacher, a bricklayer, and his wife Elisabeth. When Schumacher was 4, his father modified his pedal cart by adding a small motorcycle engine. When Schumacher crashed it into a lamppost in Kerpen, his parents took him to the karting track at Kerpenhorum, where he became the youngest member of the karting club. His father soon built him a kart from discarded parts, and at the age of 6 Schumacher won his first club championship. To support his son's racing, Rolf Schumacher took on a second job renting and repairing karts, while his wife worked at the track's canteen. Nevertheless, when Michael needed a new engine costing 800 DM, his parents were unable to afford it. He was able to continue racing with support from local businessmen. Regulations in Germany require a driver to be at least 14 years old to obtain a kart license. To get around this, Schumacher obtained a license in Luxembourg at the age of 12. In 1983, he obtained his German license, a year after he won the German Junior Kart Championship. From 1984 on, Schumacher won many German and European kart championships. He joined Eurokart dealer Adolf Neubert in 1985, and by 1987 he was the German and European kart champion. Then he quit school and began working as a mechanic. In 1988 he made his first step into single-seat car racing by participating in the German Formula Ford and Formula König series, winning the latter. In 1989, Schumacher signed with Willy Weber's WTS Formula 3 team. Funded by Weber, he competed in the German Formula 3 series, winning the title in 1990. He also won the Macau Grand Prix. At the end of 1990, along with his Formula 3 rivals Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Karl Windlinger, he joined the Mercedes Junior Racing program in the World Sports Prototype Championship. This was unusual for a young driver. Most of Schumacher's contemporaries would compete in Formula 3000 on the way to Formula One. However, Weber advised Schumacher that being exposed to professional press conferences and driving powerful cars in long-distance races would help his career. In the 1990 World Sportscar Championship season, Schumacher won the season finale at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez in a Sauber Mercedes C11 and finished fifth in the Drivers' Championship, despite only driving in 3 of the 9 races. He continued with the team in the 1991 World Sportscar Championship season, winning again at the final race of the season at Autopolis in Japan, with a Sauber Mercedes-Benz C291, leading to a 9th-place finish in the Drivers' Championship. He also competed at Le Mans during that season, finishing 5th in a car shared with Karl Windlinger and Fritz Kreutzpointner. In 1991, he competed in 1 race in the Japanese Formula 3000 Championship, finishing 2nd. Formula One career. Schumacher was noted throughout his career for his ability to produce fast laps at crucial moments in a race, to push his car to the very limit for sustained periods. Motorsport author Christopher Hilton observed in 2003 that a measure of a driver's capabilities is his performance in wet races, because the most delicate car control and sensitivity are needed, and noted that like other great drivers, Schumacher's record in wet conditions shows very few mistakes. Up to the end of the 2003 season, Schumacher won 17 of the 30 races in wet conditions he contested. Some of Schumacher's best performances occurred in such conditions, earning him the nicknames Regenkönig Rainking or Regenmeister Rainmaster, even in the non-German language media. He is known as the Red Baron because of his red Ferrari, and in reference to the German Manfred von Richthofen, the famous flying ace of World War I. Schumacher's nicknames include Schumi and Scha. Schumacher is often credited with popularizing Formula One in Germany, where it was formerly considered a French sport. When Schumacher retired in 2006, 3 of the top 10 drivers were German, more than any other nationality, and more than have ever been present in Formula One history. Younger German drivers, such as Sebastian Vettel, felt Schumacher was key in their becoming Formula One drivers. In the latter part of his Formula One career, and as one of the senior drivers, Schumacher was the president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association. In a 2006 FIA survey, Michael Schumacher was voted the most popular driver of the season among Formula One fans. Debut with Jordan. Schumacher testing the Jordan 191. Schumacher made his Formula One debut with the Jordan 4 team at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix, driving car number 32 as a replacement for the imprisoned Bertrand Gachot. Schumacher, still a contracted Mercedes driver, was signed by Eddie Jordan after Mercedes paid Jordan $150,000 for his debut. The week before the race, Schumacher impressed Jordan designer Gary Anderson and team manager Trevor Foster during a test drive at Silverstone. His manager Willy Weber assured Jordan that Schumacher knew the challenging spot track well, although in fact he had only seen it as a spectator. During the race weekend, teammate Andrea de Cesaris was meant to show Schumacher the circuit, but was held up with contract negotiations. Schumacher then learned the track on his own by cycling around the track on a fold-up bike he had brought with him. He impressed the paddock by qualifying 7th in this race. This matched the team's season-best grid position and out-qualified 11-year veteran de Cesaris. Motorsport journalist Joe Sword reported that after qualifying, clumps of German journalists were talking about the best talent since Stefan Beloff. Schumacher retired on the first lap of the race with clutch problems. Benetton, 1991-1995. Schumacher driving for Benetton at the 1992 Monaco Grand Prix. After his debut, and despite Jordan's signed agreement in principle with Schumacher's Mercedes management for the remainder of the season, Schumacher was signed by Benetton Ford for the following race. Jordan applied for an injunction in the UK courts to prevent Schumacher driving for Benetton, but lost the case as they had not yet signed a contract. Schumacher finished the 1991 season with 4 points out of 6 races. His best finish was fifth in his second race, the Italian Grand Prix, in which he finished ahead of his teammate and 3-time world champion Nelson Piquet. At the start of the 1992 season, the Sauber team, planning their Formula One debut with Mercedes backing for the following year, invoked a clause in Schumacher's contract which stated that, if Mercedes entered Formula One, Schumacher would drive for them. It was eventually agreed that Schumacher would stay with Benetton. Peter Sauber said that Schumacher didn't want to drive for us. Why would I have forced him? The year was dominated by the Williams of Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, featuring powerful Renault engines, semi-automatic gearboxes, and active suspension to control the car's ride height. In the conventional Benetton B192, Schumacher took his place on the podium for the first time, finishing third in the Mexican Grand Prix. He went on to take his first victory at the Belgian Grand Prix, in a wet race at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, which by 2003 he would call far and away my favorite track. He finished third in the Drivers' Championship in 1992, with 53 points, 3 points behind runner-up Patrese. The Williams of Damon Hill and Alain Prost also dominated the 1993 season. Benetton introduced their own active suspension and traction control early in the season, last of the front-running teams to do so. Schumacher won one race, the Portuguese Grand Prix, where he beat Prost, and had 9 podium finishes, but retired in 7 of the other 15 races. He finished the season in 4th, with 52 points. 1994-1995 World Championship years. Schumacher drove the Benetton B194 to his first World Championship in 1994. Schumacher driving for Benetton at the 1995 British Grand Prix. The 1994 season was Schumacher's first Drivers' Championship. The season, however, was marred by the deaths of Ayrton Senna, witnessed by Schumacher, who was directly behind in second position, and Roland Ratzenberger, during the San Marino Grand Prix, and by allegations that several teams, but most particularly Schumacher's Benetton team, broke the sport's technical regulations. Schumacher won 6 of the first 7 races, and was leading the Spanish Grand Prix, before a gearbox failure left him stuck in 5th gear. Schumacher finished the race in 2nd place. Following the San Marino Grand Prix, the Benetton, Ferrari, and McLaren teams were investigated on suspicion of breaking the FIA-imposed ban on electronic aids. Benetton and McLaren initially refused to hand over their source code for investigation. When they did so, the FIA discovered hidden functionality in both teams' software, but no evidence that it had been used in a race. Both teams were fined $100,000 for their initial refusal to cooperate. However, the McLaren software, which was a gearbox program that allowed automatic shifts, was deemed legal. By contrast, the Benetton software was deemed to be a form of launch control that would have allowed Schumacher to make perfect starts, which was explicitly outlawed by the regulations. However, there was no evidence to suggest that this software was actually used. At the British Grand Prix, Schumacher was penalized for overtaking on the formation lap. He then ignored the penalty and the subsequent black flag, which indicates that the driver must immediately return to the pits, for which he was disqualified and later given a 2-race ban. Benetton blamed the incident on a communication error between the stewards and the team. Schumacher was also disqualified after winning the Belgian Grand Prix, after his car was found to have illegal wear on its skid block. a measure used after the accident at Imola to limit downforce and hence cornering speed. Benetton protested that the skid block had been damaged when Schumacher spun over a curb, but the FIA rejected their appeal because of the pattern of wear and damage visible on the block. These incidents helped Damon Hill close the points gap, and Schumacher led by a single point going into the final race in Australia. On lap 36, Schumacher hit the guardrail on the outside of the track while leading. Hill attempted to pass, but as Schumacher's car returned to the track there was a collision on the corner causing them both to retire. As a result, Schumacher won a very controversial championship, the first German to do so. Jochen Rindt raced under the Austrian flag. In 1995, Schumacher successfully defended his title with Benetton. He now had the same Renault engine as Williams. He accumulated 33 more points than second-place Damon Hill. With teammate Johnny Herbert, he took Benetton to its first Constructors' Championship and became the youngest two-time world champion in Formula One history. The season was marred by several collisions with Hill. In particular, an overtaking maneuver by Hill took them both out of the British Grand Prix on lap 45, and again on lap 23 of the Italian Grand Prix. Schumacher won 9 of the 17 races, and finished on the podium 11 times. Only once did he qualify worse than 4th. At the Belgian Grand Prix, he qualified 16th, but went on to win the race. Ferrari, 1996-2006. In 1996, Schumacher joined Ferrari, a team which had last won the Drivers' Championship in 1979, and the Constructors' Championship in 1983, for a salary of $60 million over 2 years. He left Benetton a year before his contract with them expired. He later cited the team's damaging actions in 1994 as his reason for opting out of his deal. A year later, ex-Benetton employees Rory Byrne and Ross Brawn, who had been technical director at Benetton since 1991, and who were one of the key members behind Schumacher's title successes with the team in 1994 and 1995, decided to join Schumacher at Ferrari. This increased Schumacher's motivation to build a more experienced and potentially championship-winning team around him. Ferrari had previously come close to the championship in 1982 and 1990. The team had suffered a disastrous downturn in the early 1990s, partially as its famous V12 engine was no longer competitive against the smaller, lighter and more fuel-efficient V10s of its competitors. Various drivers, notably Alain Prost, had given the vehicles labels such as truck pig and accident waiting to happen. The poor performance of the Ferrari pit crews was considered a running joke too. At the end of 1995, though the team had improved into a solid competitor, it was still considered inferior to front-running teams such as Benetton and Williams. Schumacher declared the Ferrari 412D good enough to win the championship. Schumacher, Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, and Jean Todt, hired in 1993, have been credited as turning this once struggling team into the most successful team in Formula One history. Three-time world champion Jackie Stewart believes the transformation of the Ferrari team was Schumacher's greatest feat. Eddie Irvine also joined the team, moving from Jordan. 1996-1999. It was not a race. It was a demonstration of brilliance. Sterling Moss about Schumacher at the 1996 Spanish GP. Schumacher finished third in the Drivers' Championship in 1996, and helped Ferrari to second place in the Constructors' Championship ahead of his old team Benetton. He won 3 races, more than the team's total tally for the period from 1991 to 1995. During the initial part of the 1996 season, the car had reliability trouble and Schumacher did not finish 6 of the 16 races. He took his first win for Ferrari at the Spanish Grand Prix, where he lapped the entire field, up to 3rd place in the wet. In the French Grand Prix, Schumacher qualified in pole position, but suffered engine failure on the race's formation lap. However, at Spa-Francorchamps, Schumacher used well-timed pit stops to fend off Williams' Jacques Villeneuve. Following that, at Monza, Schumacher won in front of the Tifosi. Schumacher's ability, combined with the improving reliability of Ferrari, enabled him to end the season putting up a challenge to eventual race and championship winner Damon Hill at the Suzuka. Schumacher celebrates a second-place finish at the 1997 German Grand Prix. Schumacher battles with David Coulthard at the 1998 British Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve vied for the title in 1997. Villeneuve, driving the superior Williams FW19, led the championship in the early part of the season. However, by mid-season, Schumacher had taken the championship lead, winning 5 races, and entered the season's final Grand Prix with a 1-point advantage. Towards the end of the race, held at Jerez, Schumacher's Ferrari developed a coolant leak and loss of performance, indicating he may not finish the race. As Villeneuve approached to pass his rival, Schumacher attempted to provoke an accident, but got the short end of the stick, retiring from the race. Villeneuve went on and scored 4 points to take the championship. Schumacher was punished for unsportsmanlike conduct for the collision, and was disqualified from the Drivers' Championship. In 1998, Finnish driver Mika Häkkinen became Schumacher's main title competition. Häkkinen won the first 2 races of the season, gaining a 16-point advantage over Schumacher. Schumacher then won in Argentina, and, with the Ferrari improving significantly in the second half of the season, Schumacher took 6 victories, and had 5 other podium finishes. Ferrari took a 1-2 finish at the French Grand Prix, the first Ferrari 1-2 finish since 1990, and the Italian Grand Prix, which tied Schumacher with Häkkinen for the lead of the Drivers' Championship with 80 points, but Häkkinen won the championship by winning the final 2 races. There were 2 controversies. At the British Grand Prix, Schumacher was leading on the last lap when he turned into the pit lane, crossed the start-finish line, and stopped for a 10-second stop-go penalty. There was some doubt whether this counted as serving the penalty, but, because he had crossed the finish line when he came into the pit lane, the win was valid. At Spa, Schumacher was leading the race by 40 seconds in heavy spray, but collided with David Coulthard's McLaren when the Scot, a lap down, slowed in very poor visibility to let Schumacher pass. After both cars returned to the pits, Schumacher leaped out of his car and headed to McLaren's garage in an infuriated manner and accused Coulthard of trying to kill him. Rumors circulated that Coulthard may be replaced by Schumacher for the 1999 season and beyond, and, in a previous edition of the F1 Racing magazine, Ron Dennis revealed that he had approached Schumacher to sign a deal with McLaren. However, peripheral financial issues that tied Schumacher with Ferrari, such as sponsorship agreements and payment, could not be rectified in a move to the rival team, and so no deal came to fruition. Schumacher's efforts helped Ferrari win the Constructors' title in 1999. He lost his chance to win the Drivers' Championship at the British Grand Prix. At the high-speed Stowe corner, his car's rear brake failed, sending him off the track and resulting in a broken leg. During his 98-day absence, he was replaced by Finnish driver Mika Salo. After missing 6 races, he made his return at the inaugural Malaysian Grand Prix, qualifying in pole position by almost a second. He then assumed the role of second driver, assisting teammate Eddie Irvine's bid to win the Drivers' Championship for Ferrari. In the last race of the season, the Japanese Grand Prix, Häkkinen won his 2nd consecutive title. Schumacher would later say that Häkkinen was the opponent he respected the most. 2000-2004 World Championship years. Schumacher won his 4th world title in 2001. Schumacher driving the Scuderia Ferrari Marlboro F 2002, at the 2002 French Grand Prix, the race at which he clinched the 2002 Drivers' Championship, setting the record for the fewest races, in locking up the title. During this period, Schumacher won more races and championships than any other driver in the history of the sport. Schumacher won his third world championship in 2000 after a year-long battle with König. Schumacher won the first 3 races of the season and 5 of the first 8. Midway through the year, Schumacher's chances suffered with 3 consecutive non-finishes, allowing König to close the gap in the standings. König then took another 2 victories before Schumacher won at the Italian Grand Prix. At the post-race press conference, after equaling the number of wins, 41, won by his idol, Ayrton Senna, Schumacher broke into tears. The championship fight would come down to the penultimate race of the season, the Japanese Grand Prix. Starting from pole position, Schumacher lost the lead to König at the start. After his second pit stop, however, Schumacher came out ahead of König and went on to win the race and the championship. In 2001, Schumacher took his 4th driver's title. 4 other drivers won races, but none sustained a season-long challenge for the championship. Schumacher scored a record-tying 9 wins and clinched the world championship with 4 races yet to run. He finished the championship with 123 points, 58 ahead of runner-up Coulthard. Season highlights included the Canadian Grand Prix, where Schumacher finished second to his brother Ralph, thus scoring the first ever 1-2 finish by brothers in Formula One, and the Belgian Grand Prix, in which Schumacher scored his 52nd career win, breaking Alain Prost's record for most career wins. In 2002, Schumacher used the Ferrari F2002 to retain his driver's championship. There was again some controversy, however, at the Austrian Grand Prix, where his teammate, Rubens Barrichello, was leading but in the final meters of the race, under team orders, slowed down to allow Schumacher to win the race. The crowd broke into outraged boos at the result, and Schumacher tried to make amends by allowing Barrichello to stand on the top step of the podium. At the United States Grand Prix later that year, Schumacher dominated the race and was set for a close finish with Barrichello. At the end he slowed down to create a formation finish with Barrichello, but slowed too much, allowing Barrichello to take the victory. In winning the Drivers' Championship, he equaled the record set by Juan Manuel Fangio of 5 world championships. Ferrari won 15 out of 17 races, and Schumacher won the title with 6 races remaining in the season, which is still the earliest point in the season for a driver to be crowned world champion. Schumacher broke his own record, shared with Nigel Mansell, of 9 race wins in a season, by winning 11 times and finishing every race on the podium. He finished with 144 points, a record-breaking 67 points ahead of the runner-up, his teammate Rubens Barrichello. The spare finished 9 of the 17 races in the first 2 places. Schumacher at Indianapolis in 2004, where he won the 2004 United States Grand Prix. Schumacher broke Juan Manuel Fangio's record of 5 World Drivers' Championships by winning the driver's title for the 6th time in 2003, a closely contested season. The biggest competition came once again from the McLaren, Mercedes and Williams BMW teams. In the first race, Schumacher ran off track, and in the following 2, was involved in collisions. He fell 16 points behind Kimi Räikkönen. Schumacher won the San Marino Grand Prix and the next 2 races, and closed within 2 points of Räikkönen. Aside from Schumacher's victory in Canada and Barrichello's victory in Britain, the mid-season was dominated by Williams drivers Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya, who each claimed 2 victories. After the Hungarian Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher led Montoya and Kimi Räikkönen by only 1 and 2 points, respectively. Ahead of the next race, the FIA announced changes to the way tire widths were to be measured. This forced Michelin, supplier to Williams and McLaren among others, to rapidly redesign their tires before the Italian Grand Prix. Schumacher, running on Bridgestone tires, won the next 2 races. After Montoya was penalized in the United States Grand Prix, only Schumacher and Räikkönen remained in contention for the title. At the final round, the Japanese Grand Prix, Schumacher needed only 1 point whilst Räikkönen needed to win. By finishing the race in 8th place, Schumacher took 1 point, and assured his sixth World Drivers' title, ending the season 2 points ahead of Raikkonen. In 2004, Schumacher won a record 12 of the first 13 races of the season, only failing to finish in Monaco after an accident with Juan Pablo Montoya during a safety car period when he briefly locked his car's brakes. He clinched a record 7th driver's title at the Belgian Grand Prix. He finished that season with a record 148 points, 34 points ahead of the runner-up, teammate Rubens Barrichello, and set a new record of 13 race wins out of a possible 18, surpassing his previous best of 11 wins from the 2002 season. 2005-2006 Schumacher battling with Kimi Raikkonen during the 2005 Canadian Grand Prix. Rule changes for the 2005 season required tires to last an entire race, tipping the overall advantage to teams using Michelin's over teams such as Ferrari that relied on Bridgestone tires. The rule changes were partly in an effort to dent Ferrari's dominance and make the series more interesting. The most notable moment of the early season for Schumacher was his battle with Fernando Alonso in San Marino, where he started 13th and finished only 0.2 seconds behind the Spanish driver. Less than halfway through the season, Schumacher said, "I don't think I can count myself in this battle anymore. It was like trying to fight with a blunted weapon. If your weapons are weak, you don't have a chance." Schumacher's sole win in 2005 came at the United States Grand Prix. Prior to that race, the Michelin tires were found to have significant safety issues. When no compromise between the teams and the FIA could be reached, all but the 6 drivers using Bridgestone tires dropped out of the race after the formation lap. Schumacher retired in 6 of the 19 races. He finished the season in third with 62 points, fewer than half the points of world champion Alonso. 2006 became the last season of Schumacher's Ferrari career. After 3 races, Schumacher had just 11 points and was already 17 points behind Alonso. He won the following 2 races. His pole position at San Marino was his 66th, breaking Ayrton Senna's 12-year-old record. Schumacher was stripped of pole position at the Monaco Grand Prix and started the race at the back of the grid. This was due to him stopping his car and blocking part of the circuit. While Alonso was on his qualifying lap, he still managed to work his way up to 5th place on the notoriously cramped Monaco circuit. By the Canadian Grand Prix, the 9th race of the season, Schumacher was 25 points behind Alonso, but he then won the following 3 races to reduce his disadvantage to 11. After his victories in Italy, in which Alonso had an engine failure, and China, in which Alonso had tire problems, Schumacher led in the championship standings for the first time during the season. Although he and Alonso had the same point total, Schumacher was in front because he had won more races. Schumacher overtakes Kimi Raikkonen for 4th with 3 laps to go of his final race for 3 years at Interlagos, having dropped to 19th early on. The Japanese Grand Prix was led by Schumacher with only 16 laps to go when, for the first time since the 2000 French Grand Prix, Schumacher's car suffered an engine failure. Alonso won the race, giving himself a 10-point championship lead. With only 1 race left in the season, Schumacher could only win the championship if he won the season finale, and Alonso scored no points. Before the Brazilian Grand Prix, Schumacher conceded the title to Alonso. In pre-race ceremonies, football legend Pelé presented a trophy to Schumacher for his years of dedication to Formula One. During the race's qualifying session, Schumacher had one of quickest times during the first session, and was fastest in the second session, but a fuel pressure problem prevented him from completing a single lap during the third session, forcing him to start the race in 10th position. Early in the race, Schumacher moved up to 6th place. However, in overtaking Alonso's teammate, Giancarlo Fisichella, Schumacher experienced a tire puncture caused by the front wing of Fisichella's car. Schumacher pitted and consequently fell to 19th place, 70 seconds behind teammate and race leader Felipe Massa. Schumacher recovered and overtook both Fisichella and Raikkonen to secure fourth place. His performance was classified in the press as heroic, an utterly breathtaking drive, and a performance that sums up his career. 2007-2009, first retirement. BMW Sauber with thanks Michael messages towards Michael Schumacher on the back of their cars. Schumacher and Peter Sauber worked together in sports cars prior to entering F1 in 1992. While Schumacher was on the podium after winning the 2006 Italian Grand Prix, Ferrari issued a press release stating that he would retire from racing at the end of the 2006 season. Schumacher confirmed his retirement. The press release stated that Schumacher would continue working for Ferrari. It was revealed on the 29th of October 2006 that Ferrari wanted Schumacher to act as assistant to the newly appointed CEO Jean Todt. This would involve selecting the team's future drivers. After Schumacher's announcement, leading Formula One figures such as Niki Lauda and David Coulthard hailed Schumacher as the greatest all-round racing driver in the history of Formula One. 87 The Tifosi and the Italian press, who did not always take to Schumacher's relatively cold public persona, displayed an affectionate response after he announced his retirement. 2007, advisor at Ferrari. He attended several Grand Prix during the season. Schumacher drove the Ferrari F2007 for the first time on the 24th of October at Ferrari's home track in Fiorano, Italy. He ran no more than 5 laps and no lap times were recorded. A Ferrari spokesman said, "The short drive was done for the Fiat board of directors, who were holding their meeting in Maranello." Schumacher at Finale Mondiale celebrations in the F2007. During the 2007 season, Schumacher acted as Ferrari's advisor and Jean Todt's super assistant. On the 13th of November 2007, Schumacher, who had not driven a Formula One car since he had retired a year earlier, undertook a formal test session. For the first time aboard the F2007, he returned in December 2007 to continue helping Ferrari with their development program at Jerez circuit. He focused on testing electronics and tires for the 2008 Formula One season. 2008 car development. In 2007, former Ferrari top manager Ross Brawn said that Schumacher was very likely and also happy to continue testing in 2008. Schumacher later explained his role, further saying that he would deal with the development of the car inside Gestione Sportiva, and as part of that I'd like to drive, but not too often. During 2008, Schumacher also competed in motorcycle racing in the IDM Superbike series, but stated that he had no intention of a second competitive career in this sport. He was quoted as saying that riding a Ducati was the most exhilarating thing he had done in his life, the second most being skydiving. 2009, planned substitution for injured Massa. In his capacity as racing advisor to Ferrari, Schumacher was present in Budapest for the Hungarian Grand Prix, when Ferrari driver Felipe Massa was seriously injured after being struck by a suspension spring during qualifying. As it became clear that Massa would be unable to compete in the next race at Valencia, Schumacher was chosen as a replacement for the Brazilian driver, and on the 29th of July, 2009, Ferrari announced that they planned to draft in Schumacher for the European Grand Prix and subsequent Grand Prix until Massa was able to race again. Schumacher tested in a modified F2007 to prepare himself, as he had been unable to test the 2009 car due to testing restrictions. Ferrari appealed for special permission for Schumacher to test in a 2009 SPEC car, but Williams, Red Bull and Toro Rosso were against this test. Schumacher was forced to call off his return due to the severity of the neck injury he had received in a motorcycle accident earlier in the year. Massa's place at Ferrari was instead filled by Luca Badoer and Giancarlo Fisichella. Mercedes, 2010-2012. In December 2009, it was announced that Schumacher would be returning to Formula One in the 2010 season alongside fellow German driver Nico Rosberg in the new Mercedes GP team. The new Mercedes team was their first majority involvement in an F1 team since 1955. Schumacher stated that his preparations to replace the injured Massa for Ferrari had initiated a renewed interest in F1 which, combined with the opportunity to fulfill a long-held ambition to drive for Mercedes and to be working again with team principal Ross Brawn, led Schumacher to accept the offer once he was past fit. After a period of intensive training medical tests, it was confirmed that the neck injury that had prevented him driving for Ferrari the year before had fully healed. Schumacher signed a 3-year contract, reportedly worth $20 million. Schumacher's surprise return to F1 was compared to Niki Lauda's in 1982 aged 33 and Nigel Mansell's return in 1994 at age 41. Schumacher turned 41 in January 2010 and his prospects with Mercedes were compared with the record set by the oldest F1 champion Juan Manuel Fangio, who was 46 when he won his 5th championship. 2010, return to Formula One. Schumacher practicing for the Malaysian Grand Prix, from which he retired with a faulty wheel nut. Schumacher's first drive of the 2010 Mercedes car, the Mercedes MGP-W01, was at an official in February 2010, in Valencia. He finished 6th in the first race of the season at the Bahrain Grand Prix. After the Malaysian race, former driver Stirling Moss suggested that Schumacher, who had finished behind his teammate in each of the first 4 qualifying sessions and races, might be past it. Many other respected former Formula One drivers thought otherwise, including former rival Damon Hill, who warned you should never write Schumacher off. GrandPrix.com identified the inherent understeer of the Mercedes car, exacerbated by the narrower front tires introduced for the 2010 season, as contributing to Schumacher's difficulties. Jenson Button would later claim that Mercedes' 2010 car was designed for him, and that their differing driving styles may have contributed to Schumacher's difficulties. Mercedes upgraded their car for the Spanish Grand Prix, where Schumacher finished 4th. At the Monaco Grand Prix, Schumacher finished 6th after passing Ferrari's Fernando Alonso on the final corner of the race, when the safety car returned to the pits. However, he was penalized 20 seconds after the race by the race stewards, dropping him to 12th. The stewards judged the pass to be in breach of the FIA's sporting code. Mercedes' differing interpretation of the regulation would later lead to it being clarified by the FIA. Schumacher's 2010 season ended with a first lap crash at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. In Turkey, Schumacher qualified 5th and finished 4th in the race, both his best results since his return. In European Grand Prix in Valencia, Schumacher finished 15th, the lowest recorded finish in his career. In Hungary, Schumacher finished outside the points in 11th, but was found guilty of dangerous driving at 180 mph, 290 km/h, while unsuccessfully defending 10th position against Rubens Barrichello. As a result, he was demoted 10 places on the grid for the following race, the Belgian Grand Prix, where he finished 7th, despite starting 21st after his grid penalty. At the season finale in Abu Dhabi, Schumacher was involved in a major accident on the first lap, which occurred after a spin initiated by Rosberg. In recovering from the incident, Antonio Liuzzi collided with Schumacher, barely missing his head. Nobody was hurt in the crash, but Schumacher said the crash had been frightening. It was Schumacher's first season since his debut in 1991 that he finished without a win, pole position, podium, or fastest lap. He finished the season 9th with 72 points. 2011. Schumacher at the 2011 Malaysian Grand Prix. Schumacher's first points of 2011 were scored in Malaysia. He later came 6th in Spain, and had a strong race at the Canadian Grand Prix, finishing 4th, after running as high as 2nd in a wet race. Schumacher was passed late in the race by eventual winner Jenson Button. Schumacher finished 4th in the Canadian Grand Prix. Schumacher clashed with Vitaly Petrov in Valencia, and with Kamui Kobayashi in Britain, and marked the 20th anniversary of his Formula One debut at the Belgian Grand Prix. Despite starting last in Belgium, Schumacher raced well and finished fifth. Schumacher again raced well in Italy, dueling with Lewis Hamilton for fourth place. The Japanese Grand Prix saw Schumacher lead 3 laps during the race, marking the first time he had led a race since 2006. In doing so, he became the oldest driver to lead a race since Jack Brabham in 1970. At the 2011 Indian Grand Prix, Schumacher started well and finished fifth after overtaking Rosberg at the end of the race. Schumacher diced again with Rosberg in Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, battling over 6th position on the first lap. Schumacher finished the season in 8th place in the Drivers' Championship with 76 points. 2012. Schumacher climbs out of his car after spinning off during the final practice session at the Australian Grand Prix. He retired from the race with gearbox problems. Schumacher was again partnered by Rosberg at Mercedes for the 2012 season. Schumacher retired from the inaugural race of the season, Australian Grand Prix, and scored a point in the second race in Malaysia. In China, Schumacher started on the front row alongside Rosberg on pole, but retired due to a loose wheel after a mechanic's error during a pit stop. After causing a collision with Bruno Senna in Spain, Schumacher received a 5-place grid penalty for the Monaco Grand Prix. Schumacher was fastest in qualifying in Monaco, but started 6th owing to his penalty. He later retired from 7th place in the race. Schumacher qualified fastest at the 2012 Monaco Grand Prix. At the European Grand Prix, Schumacher finished third in the race, his only podium finish since his return to F1 with Mercedes. At the age of 43 years and 173 days, he became the oldest driver to achieve a podium since Jack Brabham's second-place finish at the 1970 British Grand Prix. Further records were set by Schumacher in Germany, where he set the fastest lap in a Grand Prix for the 77th time in his career, and in Belgium, where he became the second driver in history to race in 300 Grand Prix. Schumacher at the 2012 U.S. Grand Prix. Schumacher's indecision over his future plans in F1 led to him being replaced by Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for the 2013 season. In October 2012, Schumacher announced he would retire for a second time at the conclusion of the season. The following week he was quoted as saying, "There were times in the past few months in which I didn't want to deal with Formula One or prepare for the next Grand Prix." The season concluded with the 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix, in which Schumacher finished 7th. He placed 13th in the 2012 Drivers' Championship. Helmet. Schumacher's helmet for the 1994 season. Schumacher, in conjunction with Schuberth, helped develop the first lightweight carbon helmet. In 2004, a prototype was publicly tested by being driven over by a tank. It survived intact. The helmet keeps the driver cool by funneling directed airflow through 50 holes. Schumacher's helmet design for the 2011 season. Schumacher's original helmet sported the colors of the German flag and his sponsors' decals. On the top was a blue circle with white asteroids. When Jos Verstappen was his teammate, Schumacher added 4 red diagonal strokes over the visor to differentiate his helmet from his teammate. After Schumacher joined Ferrari, a prancing horse was added on the back. From the 2000 Monaco Grand Prix, in order to differentiate his colors from his new teammate Rubens Barrichello, Schumacher changed the upper blue color and some of the white areas to red. Since 2004, the helmet sported a white diagonal line with a white vertical line in the zone of the German flag colors, originally to accommodate sponsor AMD, but then these lines remained in the Suzuka 2006 design. He sported one-off helmet designs 4 times. For the 1998 Japanese Grand Prix, a title decider with Mika Hakkinen, he replaced the German flag with a checkered flag motif and reflective silver, replacing the white areas. At the 2004 Italian Grand Prix, the German flag design was replaced with an Italian flag in honor of his team's home race. For the Brazilian Grand Prix race of 2006, at the time intended to be his final Grand Prix, he wore an all-red helmet that included the names of his 91 Grand Prix victories. For the 2011 Belgian Grand Prix, Schumacher's 20th anniversary in Formula One, he wore a commemorative gold-leafed helmet. The helmet, very similar to his current helmet, included the year of his debut to the present, and the years of his 7 world titles. For the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix, Schumacher's 300th Grand Prix appearance, he wore a special platinum-leafed helmet with a message of his achievement. Honors. Turns 8-9 of the Nürburgring were renamed after Schumacher in 2007. Schumacher was honored many times during his career. In April 2002, for his contributions to sport and his contributions in raising awareness of child education, he was named as one of the UNESCO champions for sport, joining the other 8, which include Pelé, Sergei Bubka and Justine Henin. He won the Laureus World Sportsman of the Year award twice, in 2002 and 2004, for his performances in the 2001 and 2003 seasons respectively. He also received nominations for the 2001, 2003, 2005, and 2007 awards. He shares the record for having the second most nominations for the award with Roger Federer, with 6 nominations, and is eclipsed only by Tiger Woods, who has been nominated 7 times. He holds the distinction of having the most nominations for a motorsport athlete. Fernando Alonso has been nominated only twice, Sebastian Vettel 3 times, and Valentino Rossi 5 times, and being the only motorsport athlete to have won the award. In honor of Schumacher's racing career and his efforts to improve safety and the sport, he was awarded an FIA Gold Medal for Motorsport in 2006. In 2007, in recognition of his contribution to Formula One racing, the Nürburgring racing track renamed turns 8 and 9, the Audi and Shell Curve S as the Schumacher S, and a month later he presented A1 Team Germany with the A1 World Cup at the A1GP World Cup of Motorsport 2007 awards ceremony. He was nominated for the Prince of Asturias Award for Sport for 2007, which he won both for sporting prowess and for his humanitarian record. In 2008, the Swiss Football Association appointed Schumacher as the Swiss ambassador for the 2008 European Football Championship. On the 30th of April, 2010, Schumacher was honored with the Officier of Legion Honor title from French Prime Minister François Fillon. Controversy. Championship deciding collisions. Going into the 1994 Australian Grand Prix, the final race of the 1994 season, Schumacher led Damon Hill by a single point in the Drivers' Championship. Schumacher led the race from the beginning, but on lap 35 he went off track and hit the wall with his right side wheels, returning to the track at reduced speed and with car damage, but still leading the race. At the next corner Hill attempted to pass on the inside, but Schumacher turned in sharply and they collided. Both cars were eliminated from the race, and, as neither driver scored, Schumacher took the title. The race stewards judged it a racing accident and took no action against either driver, but public opinion is divided over the incident, and Schumacher was vilified in the British media. At the 1997 European Grand Prix at Jerez, the last race of the season, Schumacher led Williams' Jacques Villeneuve by 1 point in the Drivers' Championship. As Villeneuve attempted to pass Schumacher at the Dreisac corner on lap 48, Schumacher turned in and the right front wheel of Schumacher's Ferrari hit the left side pod of Villeneuve's car. Schumacher retired from the race as a result, but Villeneuve finished in 3rd place, taking 4 points, and so becoming the world champion. The race stewards did not award any penalty, but 2 weeks after the race Schumacher was disqualified from the entire 1997 Drivers' Championship, after a FIA disciplinary hearing found that his maneuver was an instinctive reaction, and although deliberate, not made with malice or premeditation. It was a serious error. Schumacher accepted the decision and admitted having made a mistake. Schumacher's actions were widely condemned in British, German, and Italian newspapers. This made Schumacher the only driver in the history of the sport, as of 2012, to be disqualified from the Drivers' World Championship, although the McLaren team was disqualified from the 2007 Constructors' Championship, and fined $100 million for illegal possession of Ferrari technical information. Team orders. Historically, team orders have always been an accepted part of Formula One. However, in the final meters of the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, Schumacher's teammate, Rubens Barrichello, slowed his car under orders from Ferrari to allow Schumacher to pass and win the race. Although the switching of positions did not break any actual sporting or technical regulation, it angered fans, and it was claimed that the team's actions showed a lack of sportsmanship and respect to the spectators. Many argued that Schumacher did not need to be given wins in only the 6th race of the season, particularly given that he had already won 4 of the previous 5 Grands Prix, and that Barrichello had dominated the race weekend up to that point. At the podium ceremony, Schumacher pushed Barrichello onto the top step, and for this disturbance, the Ferrari team incurred a $1 million fine. Later in the season, at the end of the 2002 United States Grand Prix, Schumacher slowed down within sight of the finishing line, allowing Barrichello to win by 0.011 seconds, the second closest margin in F1 history. Schumacher's explanation varied between it being him returning the favor for Austria now that Schumacher's title was secure, or trying to engineer a dead heat, a feat derided as near impossible in a sport where timings are taken to within a thousandth of a second. The FIA subsequently banned team orders which interfere with the race result, but the ban was lifted for the 2011 season because the ruling was difficult to enforce. Dangerous driving. During his spell in Sauber, in the 1991 Sportscar World Championship, Schumacher was involved in a serious incident with Derek Warwick in that year's 430 kilometers of Nürburgring. While trying to set his flying lap in qualifying, Schumacher encountered Warwick's Jaguar on a slow lap, resulting in lost time for Schumacher. As retaliation for being in his way, Schumacher swerved the Sauber into Warwick's car, hitting the Jaguar's nose and front wheel. Enraged by the German's attitude, Warwick drove to the pits and chased a fleeing Schumacher on foot through the Sauber pits. He eventually caught up with Schumacher, and it took intervention from Jochen Mass to prevent Warwick physically assaulting Schumacher. Toward the end of the 2010 Hungarian Grand Prix, Rubens Barrichello attempted to pass Schumacher down the inside on the main straight. Schumacher closed the inside line to force Barrichello onto the outside, but Barrichello persisted on the inside at 180 mph, 290 km/h, despite the close proximity of a concrete wall and Schumacher leaving him only inches to spare. Barrichello said, "It is the most dangerous thing that I have been through, and there is not a rule for that, but between ourselves we should take a line, stick to it, and that's it." Schumacher said that obviously there was space enough to go through. "We didn't touch, so I guess I just left enough space for him to come through." Ross Brawn said at the end of the day he gave him enough space. You can argue that it was marginal, but it was just tough racing. A range of ex-drivers and commentators were highly critical of Schumacher. Although there was no accident, the race steward, the same Derek Warwick of the 1991 Nürburgring incident, wanted to black flag Schumacher since that would have shown a better example to our young drivers. The Hungaroring incident was ruled to be dangerous and Schumacher received a 10-place grid penalty for the next race. Schumacher accepted the decision and apologized. Other incidents. In 1995, Schumacher and Williams driver David Coulthard were disqualified for fuel irregularities after a switch to Renault engines and L-foils. On appeal, both drivers had their results and points reinstated, but both teams lost the points the results would normally have earned in the Constructors' Championship. The 1998 Canadian Grand Prix saw Schumacher accused of dangerous driving when his exit from the pit lane forced Heinz-Harald Frentzen off the track and into retirement. Despite receiving a 10-second penalty, Schumacher recovered and won the race. 2 laps from the finish of the 1998 British Grand Prix, Schumacher was leading the race when he was issued a stop-and-go penalty for overtaking a lapped car, Alexander Wurz, during the early moments of the safety car period. This penalty involves going into the pit lane and stopping for 10 seconds, and the rules state that a driver must serve his penalty within 3 laps of the penalty being issued. On the 3rd lap after receiving the penalty, Schumacher turned into the pit lane to serve his penalty, but as this was the last lap of the race, and as Ferrari's pit box was located after the start/finish line, Schumacher technically finished the race before serving the penalty. The stewards initially resolved that problem by adding 10 seconds to Schumacher's race time, then later rescinded the penalty completely due to the irregularities in how the penalty had been issued. In the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix, Schumacher was involved in a race-ending collision whilst trying to lap David Coulthard in heavy spray. After the race he stormed into the McLaren garage and accused Coulthard of trying to kill him, and McLaren and Ferrari team members had to separate the drivers. Coulthard admitted some 5 years later that the accident had been his mistake. Rubens Barrichello makes way for Schumacher at the end of the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix. During qualifying for the 2006 Monaco Grand Prix, Schumacher set the fastest time, but stopped his car in the Riscase corner on the racing line, leaving the corner partially blocked, while his main contender for the season title, Fernando Alonso, was on his final qualifying lap. Schumacher stated that he simply locked up the wheels going into the corner and that the car then stalled while he attempted to reverse out. Alonso believed he would have been on pole if the incident had not happened, and Schumacher was stripped of pole position by the race stewards and started the race at the back of the grid. In the same qualifying session, Giancarlo Fisichella was similarly found to have blocked David Coulthard from improving his time, but Fisichella was only demoted 5 places on the grid. At the 2010 Monaco Grand Prix, the safety car was deployed after an accident involving Caranchanda and Jarno Trulli and pulled into the pits on the last lap. Schumacher passed Alonso before the finish line. Mercedes held that the combination of the race control messages, safety car, in this lap, and track clear, and the green flags and lights shown by the marshals after safety car line 1 indicated that the race was not finishing under the safety car, and all drivers were free to race. This opinion appears to have been shared by the majority of the teams with cars in the top 10 positions, who also gave their drivers instructions to race to the finish line. However, an FIA investigation found Schumacher guilty of breaching safety car regulations and awarded him a 20 seconds penalty, which cost him 6 places. Personal life: Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher in 2007. Born the 3rd of January, 1969, age 45, Perth, West Germany. Nationality German. Occupation racing driver, philanthropist. Religion Roman Catholic. Spouse S. Corona Betch, M. 1995. Children: Gina Maria, B. 1997, Mick, B. 1999. Relatives: Ralph Schumacher, brother, Sebastian Stahl, stepbrother. Signature. Website: Michael Schumacher. Schumacher's younger brother Ralph was a Formula One driver until the end of 2007. Their stepbrother Sebastian Stahl has also been a racing driver. In August 1995, Michael married Corona Betch. They have 2 children. Gina Maria, born on the 20th of February, 1997, and Mick, born on the 22nd of March, 1999. He has always been very protective of his private life, and is known to dislike the celebrity spotlight, preferring a simple life. The family moved to a house near Gland, Switzerland, in 2007, a 650 square meter, 7,000 square feet, mansion with its own underground garage and petrol station, situated on a private beach on Lake Geneva. The family has 2 dogs, one stray that Corinna fell in love with in Brazil, and an Australian shepherd named Ed, whose entrance to the family made headlines. Schumacher personally drove a taxi through the Bavarian town of Coburg after collecting the dog, enabling the family to catch their return flight to Switzerland. Both Schumacher and the taxi driver were reprimanded by local police. One of his main hobbies is horse riding, and he plays football for his local team FC Ekachens. He has appeared in several charity football games and organized games between Formula One drivers. He is a fan of Colne and Newcastle United. On the 23rd of June, 2003, Schumacher was appointed as an ambassador-at-large for the Most Serene Republic of San Marino. Schumacher is a special ambassador to UNESCO and has donated €1.5 million to the organization. Additionally, he paid for the construction of a school for poor children and for area improvements in Dakar, Senegal. He supports a hospital for child victims of war in Sarajevo, which specializes in caring for amputees. In Lima, Peru, he funded the Palace for the Poor Center for helping homeless street children obtain an education, clothing, food, medical attention, and shelter. He stated his interest in these various efforts was piqued both by his love for children and the fact that these causes had received little attention. While an exact figure for the amount of money he has donated throughout his life is unknown, it is known that in his last 4 years as a driver, he donated at least $50 million. In 2008, it was revealed that he had donated between $5 million and $10 million to the William J. Clinton Presidential Center and Park of Bill Clinton. Since his participation in an FIA European road safety campaign as part of his punishment after the collision at the 1997 European Grand Prix, Schumacher continued to support other campaigns such as Make Roads Safe, which is led by the FIA Foundation and calls on G8 countries and the UN to recognize global road deaths as a major global health issue. In 2008, Schumacher was the figurehead of an advertising campaign by Bacardi to raise awareness about responsible drinking, with a focus on communicating an international message: drinking and driving don't mix. He featured in an advertising campaign for television, cinema, and online media, supported by consumer engagements, public relations, and digital media across the world. On the eve of the 2002 British Grand Prix, on behalf of Fiat, Schumacher presented a Ferrari 360 Modena to the Indian cricketer Sachin Tendulkar at Silverstone. On the 21st of June, 2009, Schumacher appeared on the BBC's motoring program Top Gear as the Stig. Presenter Jeremy Clarkson hinted later in the program that Schumacher was not the regular Stig, and the BBC has since confirmed that this is the case. Schumacher was there on that occasion because Ferrari would not allow anyone else to drive the one-of-a-kind black Ferrari FXX, which was featured in the show. The FXX was presented to Schumacher upon his retirement at Monza in 2006. During his interview with Clarkson, Schumacher stated that his road cars are a Fiat 500 Abarth and a Fiat Croma, which is his family car. Finance and sponsorship. In 2004, Forbes magazine listed him as the second highest paid athlete in the world. In 2005, Eurobusiness magazine identified Schumacher as the world's first billionaire athlete. His 2004 salary was reported to be around $18 million. Forbes magazine ranked him 17th in its The World's Most Powerful Celebrities list. A significant share of his income came from advertising. For example, Deutsche Vermögensberatung paid him $8 million over 3 years from 1999 for wearing a 10 by 8 centimeter advertisement on his post-race cap. The deal was extended until 2010. He donated $10 million for aid after the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake. His donation surpassed that of any other sportsperson, most sports leagues, many worldwide corporations, and even some countries. Schumacher's bodyguard, Burkhard Kramer, and Kramer's two sons were killed in the tsunami. In 2010, his personal fortune was estimated at $515 million. He reportedly received a salary of $21 million each year from the Mercedes team, plus a further $9 million in endorsements. 2013 skiing accident. On the 29th of December, 2013, Schumacher was skiing with his 14-year-old son Mick on an unsecured area between two marked pistes on the Dent de Bergen near Maribel, in the French Alps. He fell and hit his head on a rock, sustaining a head injury, despite wearing a ski helmet. He was attended by two ski patrollers and airlifted within 15 minutes to the local hospital in Moutiers, and then to Centre Hospitalier Universitaire de Grenoble, a regional hospital that specializes in the treatment of brain injuries. Der Spiegel reported that eyewitnesses had stated that Schumacher was not traveling fast at the time of his accident, a maximum of 20 km per hour. This corroborated the statement of Schumacher's spokesperson, who stated that he could not have been traveling fast, as he had just helped a friend who had fallen. When his helmet camera was examined, it was reported that he was traveling at a completely normal speed for this type of terrain, and for a good skier. Police investigations had also ruled out any faults with Schumacher's skiing equipment, or unclear signage on the slopes and boundaries. On the 30th of December, it was announced that Schumacher was in critical condition and in a medically induced coma due to suffering a traumatic brain injury, and had undergone urgent neurosurgery to relieve pressure on his brain, after a scan showed he had suffered cerebral contusion. On the following day, doctors said that Schumacher had undergone a second surgery, and his condition had improved slightly, although he was still not out of danger, and the condition remains critical. The doctors said they would need still more time to give a prognosis. According to his physicians, Schumacher would most likely have died had he not been wearing a helmet. On the 1st of January, 2014, 3 days after his accident, it was reported that Schumacher's condition was critical but stable and that he had shown some signs of improvement.